Today we've got a great malicious compliance story all about preparing some coffee. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, I am too loud at night? How about Sunday at 6? I live on an apartment complex on the highest floor. When I moved in, I was short on time and painted the walls up until 2 a.m. The ladder made some sound and my neighbors knocked. We were almost done anyways, so we called it quits and thought everything is fine. A month in, and I get a letter from the company that owns this building that says something along the lines of, "Disturbance of peace. We got a complaint from your neighbors about construction sounds and regular use of the washing machine in the middle of the night. Please be respectful towards your neighbors and don't be too loud between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I was ticked since the construction sounds were only once and I never used my washing machine in the middle of the night, especially not regularly. But I didn't want to start an argument with the company or beef with my neighbors, so I thought, since I wasn't doing that anyway, I would just ignore it, and if there's another complaint, I'll reach out. A few weeks ago, I had my sister over on a Saturday and we watched some TV at night and she accidentally kicked over a glass bottle. Happens. Instantly, there were 3 loud and angry knocks coming from below, which somehow ticked me off really bad. Now, since I'm obviously too loud, I decided to strictly adhere to the rules and time my washing machine in a way where it ends exactly at 10 p.m. and starts at 6 a.m., especially Sundays. Usually I did laundry at around 5 p.m., but I got a change of heart and hope that my neighbors are annoyed when my machine wakes them up at 6 in the morning on the weekend, just like they obviously wanted me to, and they can do nothing about it since I'm not breaking any rules. Edit. I get that they're probably trying to sleep, and I know that the 2 a.m. painting session was a mistake. I am upset that they reacted with complaints to the company and banging on the ceiling instead of talking to me. People are clumsy and drop stuff. I heard other neighbors vacuum and drop things at night and I simply don't care. Things happen. But if they want to be childish, I'm going to be childish by sticking to the rules. OP does one 2 a.m. painting home improvement session and all of a sudden to that neighbor, OP's running a metalworking shop or something. Whatever happened to the first offense, leave a note or reach out kind of thing? Why would the neighbor go the way they did and immediately create bad blood between them and OP? Bob Manuk commented, "I used to live in a flat that was relatively newly built. Luckily, we were just renting because my god, the walls were paper thin. Literally just existing was an annoyance to some people. Have the TV on, complaint. Do the laundry, complaint. Go out on the balcony for some fresh air, complaint. The most annoying thing was that the neighbors never spoke to us about it. It was always snide notes in every mailbox, including ours, pointing out how loud we were and to complain to concierge to get us kicked out. I even spoke to concierge and said, come on up, anytime. You choose when, and you decide how bad it is. They did every time there was a complaint. Most of the time, we were never there. Didn't stop the complaints though. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, update, I guess you like paperwork. Info, I jumped the gun and posted the story without the fallout. To rectify this, here's the story in its entirety plus the reaction at the bottom. So, background, I work in US Customs Compliance, which, due to the current administration, is annoyingly unstable. Tariffs are being changed left and right, as well as the definitions of what products count as what kind of products, or materials being classified as specific exceptions. It's a mess. However, there's this thing called duty drawback that ended up being a big deal at my company. To really water it down, if Company A imports products to the US, but then immediately ships it to, say, Canada to their franchise stores, Company B, then technically Company A was simply a stop-on route and not the ultimate receiver. Company B pays taxes, called duty, on the product. Because Company A also paid taxes, Company A is due a refund for the duty paid, hence duty drawback. So, after months of chasing down this information, going back 5 years, learning we had holes in the info, trying to patch that up, trying to figure out the math, making it accurate, finding errors, etc., up to 16-hour days because someone promised we could get this done in 2 months when we needed 5, and weekends torpedoed by work calls, we finally submitted the application. And it worked. We got a great return, but because we missed the deadline by a day and it was a rocky process, my boss was let go over poor performance and missed opportunities. Never mind the fact that this project was his idea and he was the one who got it rolling in the first place. And then the higher-ups decided that they wanted records of everything covered. Not digital though, that's not official enough. Printed in binders with official letterhead. Sealed and signed if you would. Well, my boss's superior, who was covering his desk, came to us livid at the extra work we had to do and said, "They want paperwork? They get paperwork. Find the biggest binders you can find and put everything on hold until they get what they want. And, just to make sure they see everything, print it single-sided." So far, we have about 3,600 printed pages, hole punched by yours truly, stuffed into 6 binders, and that got us through June of year 1 of 5. The binder pile is 3 feet tall already, and I get to do more of that when I get back to work. Compared to what I've been through recently, this is practically a vacation. And today, I finally got the response. When I came into work, all 6 binders were missing, and I came to find out my new boss had taken them to the higher-ups without us. She apparently marched right over to the executive's office and dropped all 6 binders on the desk without a word. This is paraphrasing, but this is what she relayed to us afterwards. The executive asked, "What is this?" Boss says, "The records you asked for." The executive responds, "Ah, good. Now," and then boss clarifies, "the first 6 months." The executive pauses. "The what?" My boss replied, "Of the first year, of 5. My boss then described in absolute glee how the executive sat there sweating as she continued to explain how she was glad that we could get such important work done in the middle of the tariff changes and the policy updates, and she was so happy the executive was willing to store all of the records, which prompted the executive to ask why they were being stored in his office. Well, that's when he was reminded that due to digital supremacy, our offsite storage for file retention had been drastically reduced last year. He asked for the rest of the files in PDF. We couldn't stop laughing, quietly, on the way back to our desks. Vacation over, I guess. I get that in some situations, having it tangibly in front of you on paper is nice, but if you actually wanted to go through 5 years of records, why would you want that on paper? I would want that in a beautifully formatted PDF that I can actually Control F and search through. They just casually ordered OP and their coworkers to knock out an acre of a forest that they had no intention of actually looking through. Schneeflock667 commented, "It's somewhat disappointing that you did not print out everything before going up." OP replied, "I wanted to, and we had the binders ready, but I think a 3 feet tall tower of paper and plastic still got the point across. Geez, I can't even imagine how heavy that was. I only lifted one at a time." Our next story is, couldn't have a day off, fate had my back. In my 20s, I spent a little over 5 years working for an oil and gas well service company. It was a 15 on, 6 off rotation. The first 4 years was at a small shop roughly 7 hours from home, at which point I transferred to a much busier shop that was only a few hours from home. 5 years seems like peanuts in the working world, but in this particular line of work, it was a long time. Decent job security as far as oil field work goes, but the pay was marginal at best, so turnover was high. At 5 years, I was the most experienced hand in our shop. The new shop was definitely busier, the money was way better, and I managed to have my days off matched up with a supervisor whose way of doing things meshed perfectly with me. Everything else about the place? Awful. My breaking point was being denied a day off with 2 days' notice to attend a funeral for a good friend who was lost to some health complications after a car accident. I was generally pretty understanding that in our line of work, it could be difficult to always balance manpower, but the day I requested off passed with 4 other hands sitting around at the shop doing make-work projects to pass the day. Management couldn't be bothered to take a few minutes to see if they could make things work. It was easier to just say no. To that point in my employment there, I had been extremely flexible with helping out during manpower shortages. I had probably worked in excess of 100 days off and had only ever used one sick day. I thought a little reciprocity would have been nice, but I made up my mind. I would fulfill my obligation to work 1 year at that shop, as to not have to pay back the $4,000 transfer bonus I'd received, and then it would be time to move on. I was only a few months off of that 1 year mark, so I started job shopping immediately and quickly set my sights on a mine that we regularly did work for that was close enough to home that I could commute on a daily basis. I made some inquiries with people I knew that were working there, and it seemed right up my alley. Not long after that, I updated my resume and sent it in. A few weeks later, I'm driving back from a job and get a voicemail from HR at the company I applied to. I called back as soon as I had a spare minute, and they were looking to have me come in for an interview 2 days later. My heart sank, knowing that was going to be a struggle. I talked with the HR lady, seeing if they had any other dates available, but it was explained to me that they only arrange one interview day once they have enough holes to fill in their crews to justify doing orientation with a group of new hires. She said she could put me as first call for the next round, but didn't know when that would be, and she said it would also be fairly short notice. In the end, I agreed to the interview appointment, not knowing how I was going to make it work. I immediately went to the assistant manager to ask for time off, as he was looking after dispatching duties that week. I told him something important came up at home that I really need to get dealt with. Without hesitation, he said, "No, we have a full board this week and need you here. Whatever it is, we'll have to wait for your days off." My first thought was that I was just going to call in sick and go to the job interview. The last thing I wanted to do was worry about being fired from a job I no longer want. Then I realized maybe there was another path forward and went to the job board. And there it was, exactly what I needed. A potentially week-long job for the company I was set to interview with, and the job was scheduled to start the next day. And none of the jobs had been assigned to crews yet. I filled my supervisor in with the circumstances and my plan, and he was on board with it. We went to the assistant manager and offered to take that job. He was delighted to have us volunteer, as not many crews cared to be away from home for a week, mainly being confined to a rig shack. Day 1 went smoothly, and we were done by early afternoon. I used the supervisor's truck and went home to get some interview-appropriate clothes. Day 2, we were running a bit behind, but we just barely got the job set up and our tools deployed into the well with enough time for me to grab a quick shower and change of clothes before again taking the supervisor's truck over to the administration building for my interview. Got a call the next week with an offer of a start date 2 weeks out. Starting wage was definitely lower than I was making, but they offered clearly defined progression that would have me equaling my current income in year 2 and well exceeding it by year 4. Benefits were better, and the schedule would give me twice as much time off. Went to give my manager 2 weeks notice, and he asked where I was going and what I would be making. He was appalled I'd leave for such a low starting wage. He asked what it would take to keep me. I told him, when a person takes a pay cut to leave, obviously that ship sailed long ago. You know, this would have been one thing if there really was like a lot of all hands on deck kind of work that OP needed to have done. But for them to say, nah, you can't go to your friend's funeral, and then show up to work and everybody's just picking their nose, who in their right mind is going to have loyalty after that? I can't imagine though how much it must have felt like destiny to realize they have a job at that company exactly when they need that day off. I'm not sure if I've ever had that much crossing of luck when it comes down to an important date that I have to pay attention to in my life. I mean, if anybody could beat the luck OP had in this story, I'd love to hear it. Cancel Everything commented, the missing a good friend's funeral after a sudden passing and then not even being able to justify it with extreme business must have had you fuming. So sorry you went through that. Hope the other workplace was better once you jumped ship. OP responded, thanks. Still feels awkward now that I didn't attend. Thankfully, that was the first and only friend from our group that's been lost to this point. I think that first one hits a person especially hard, and at that age, suddenly the realities of life start feeling that much more real. As others in this comment string have suggested, I've definitely learned that there are times to request time off and times to tell your employer that they're going through the day without you. Fortunately, I really haven't had to do the latter where I am now. Our next story is not allowed to take vacation days from overtime all at once or on Fridays? Got you. So a few years back when I was working for my previous company as a commissioning engineer, about 60% of the year field service, 40% office, I had accrued about 10 days of not yet planned overtime by the beginning of October. We were allowed to use that overtime as vacation days, which made sense for me because I'd have to pay a hefty amount of taxes on that money otherwise, and I didn't particularly need that money. So at some point, my then boss calls me to his office to tell me I should plan when I'd take those days, with the requirement to not take them all at once and not on Fridays for the rest of the year. Since I'd already planned 3 weeks of vacation from vacation days during Christmas, he probably had some things in mind. His intention about the not everything at once part probably was to not have me missing for 5 weeks at once. The intention about the not on Fridays part probably was to not have me going home from any possible field trips every Tuesday evening. So I sat at my desk and started thinking about if I should use those days in a way of 2 times a full week of vacation or some extended weekends beginning after Wednesdays. Looking through my calendar which Wednesdays I would be best to use, I had a brilliant idea. Wednesdays. 10 weeks in a row, adding to that 3 weeks during Christmas. So, starting the next week, I didn't go on any field trips for 3 months. Safe to say, my boss wasn't particularly happy, but didn't say a word since his requirements were fully met. I don't know if I fully understand OP's explanation for the not on Fridays part. I'm just going to assume maybe Fridays are just like a particularly busy day or something, or maybe there's a lot of organizational put things back where they belong kind of stuff that happens on Friday. Regardless, I don't see how OP's going to schedule all of this time off in any way that's not going to be probably at least slightly annoying to that manager. I mean, what did they ideally want OP to do? Start filling off their time off on their calendar like I would back in high school on a Scantron sheet for a test I didn't study for? Just cover my eyes and fill the blinks in at random and hope OP can keep track of it? Christian Morrill commented, I know a guy in the company I work for that only works 4 days a week. When I inquired how he got such a sweet deal, it was actually because he'd been in the company for 25 years and has tons of accumulated annual leave. They asked him to create a plan to reduce this annual leave, and he came up with taking every Monday off. Now, Mondays for some reason in our company are very busy, but not for him anymore. Our next story is, I can only take leave in full day increments? Works for me. I accumulate annual leave at a certain number of hours per week, and after one has accumulated 480 hours, you lose any leave until you bring the balance under 480. I would take 3 hours of leave a week to keep just under 480, and it would just bug my boss that someone would need or want to do that, so he heads over to HR to explain the situation. They tell him the official policy is that leave is to be taken in full day increments. They also tell him that we shouldn't be changing our timesheets to reflect the hours worked, since we're all salary, so just go ahead and approve them as is, unless we have a holiday to put down. He says the idea behind this is that since we're salary, the company knows we'll have heavy weeks and lighter weeks, and it'll be a wash in the end. Okay, so I've been losing my 3 hours of leave a week, but I haven't worked a full week in months. At most, I've put in 30 hours. I just try to be efficient with my time to make it work. Oftentimes, I'll work 1 hour and call it a day. Took a 5-minute work call while on holiday. Thanks for keeping me from burning a full day of leave. I thought the other way was more honest to the company, but they schooled me on how real business works. I'm kind of curious if most people feel like this system is inherently bad, because kind of like what OP's insinuating, people might coast a little bit when they know they have those guaranteed amount of hours. I understand the frustration from OP, and I can't say that I would necessarily do anything different. It's more just working with the leeway and, I guess, expectations the company's setting for you. Skeptic Idiot commented, sounds like you need a consecutive 480-hour vacation. Our next story is malicious compliance on boss led to new job and him being fired. Nearly 30 years ago, I worked for the US national sales company for a major automotive brand. I was in product planning working on the launch of a new model vehicles, but was junior level at the time. My boss was a real hard butt on things and was the type that when he did something wrong, then it was someone else's fault, or if it was a good thing that happened, he would take all the credit. One Friday, he dumped in my lap that a shipment of wheels and tires had to be sent to Europe for the following Monday as part of a photo shoot. This was the same trip that he had previously denied my travel request to support the event. Also, he knew about these wheels and tires a week or more prior, and I think he was trying to make me look bad by dumping it on me last minute. When I asked him about how I was supposed to get these packed and shipped for arrival in 2 days, he told me to just get it done and not to bother him with the detail. Further, he wanted the wheels and tires back ASAP after the photo shoot. Trigger malicious compliance on this. So I booked a flight to Europe and took the wheels and tires as oversized luggage. I then rented a van, collected the wheels and tires, and took them to the photo shoot. I took care of business, hung around for the next 2 days, and then took the wheels and tires back with me on a return flight on Tuesday morning. What was so sweet was that the executives on site were very impressed by my dedication to make the photo shoot a success. Apparently, one of the executives sent a note to my boss praising my support in making the event work. To say my boss was ticked at me was an understatement. However, what could he do but take the credit as his plan? Shortly after this, I was offered the role as a vehicle manager in corporate communications group, which I gladly took, even though my boss tried to prevent it. My former boss was let go about 4 months later. Apparently, he had no one else to blame for his mess-ups. So this boss basically just did everything they could do to get OP in trouble or stunt their career or maybe get them fired, but from the sounds of it, ended up being the catalyst that ended up in OP getting a promotion? How much more satisfying can you get? Dead Money Drew commented, "I'm betting that the cost of flying yourself, plus the wheels and equipment as oversized luggage, wasn't that much more expensive than shipping the equipment overnight. Next day air is freaking expensive, and for good reason." Our next story is under supervised. Back when I was working in an FAA facility doing repair and overhaul, we had a boss who wanted to control everything. This boss came to us from the production side and didn't understand why we were reactive in our work versus scheduled like production. Repair and overhaul is just that. We repair or overhaul parts that come back from the field, so cannot schedule it more than the customer lets us know it's broken and we say send it in type thing. Not the point, not the compliance, but giving you a little of how the mindset is. Anyway, about a month after said boss comes in, we have a customer representative who was talking to engineering regarding the product I was working on. The customer had a question regarding a specific failure we continued to see and wanted to talk to the technician, me, about it. So engineer brings customer to me and I answer customer rep's question. Should be easy, right? Wrong. Boss says I did not have the authority to answer the question and that customer should have been brought to him or quality assurance. At the next morning stand-up, boss reiterates to the entire group that no one is to talk to anyone not a part of our company without either boss or QA there for conversation. I asked for this in writing and got an email within minutes after the stand-up. Fast forward about a month, I'm not talking to anyone without boss or QA, and we have an ISO 9001 audit. The audit is scheduled, and somehow when the auditor is on the repair floor, no one is around but me, so naturally I get audited. Should be easy, right? Auditor asks me what I'm doing. I reply, I'm not allowed to talk with personnel who do not belong to my company without my boss or QA present. The auditor asks me if I know who they are. I do. They introduce themselves as they came up to me. I let them know that I've been given instructions and cannot talk to them. They ask me if I can show them the instructions. I had sent the email to the printer as soon as I knew I was going to be audited, so I asked the auditor to please wait 1 minute and went and got the email. Auditor thanks me and leaves. Next morning at stand-up, boss comes in with regional management. Boss apologizes to us technicians and lets us know that we're allowed to talk to people from outside the company without boss or QA. I raise my hand. Boss says email has already been sent. Found out from boss's aide, boss was put on PIP, Personnel Improvement Program, for this. Is there a difference between a control freak boss and a micromanaging boss? Or is there always kind of an overlap here? Because a boss that's bad in this way is kind of giving me like a distinctive odor. The whole, essentially, don't talk to anybody outside the company without me being there. Not just like micromanaging you, but making sure everything has to go through them as the mouthpiece. Captain Bao Bao commented, I am certified quality manager for ISO 9001. This is exactly how an audit works. You ask questions to field workers. 9 on 10, they already know the solution to the problems that puzzle the management. So while it's counterintuitive, workers loved to be audited by QM. Because 1, they feel listened, and 2, we cast their words with a credibility that they don't have themselves. Our next story is, don't use the good water for coffee? Okay. I've read some malicious compliance stories pertaining to coffee and decided to share my own. My family owns a funeral home and I would work there for a summer job when I was in high school. While working there, I would show up before everyone and make coffee for the day and do some light cleaning. The break room where the coffee machine was also had your standard office water cooler, so I would make the coffee with the good water. One day I was making the coffee and my grandfather, the boss, showed up and asked why I was using the expensive water instead of the tap. I told him the tap water makes the coffee taste like crap. I know because I'd made it with tap once, took a sip, and then poured it right down the drain. He didn't believe it was that bad. He made his coffee from tap at home and it's fine. Note, he never drank the office coffee. He drank his at home with breakfast. What he didn't take into account was that while the funeral home was nice and remodeled, very old building, the pipes were not because the water was used to flush toilets and wash hands, not for drinking. He insisted that tomorrow I use tap. The coffee would mask the taste and no one would tell the difference. I replied, okay, you're the boss. The next day, I make the coffee with the tap. Now, on this day, we had a funeral that morning. 2 funeral directors, some members of the family of the deceased, the preacher and I were in the break room trading small-town gossip when one of the directors took a big chug of the coffee. The machine was old, the coffee came out hot, but the hot plate would only keep it lukewarm, and immediately spewed it all over the preacher, ruining his white dress shirt. This was also the first time I ever heard a preacher curse. The funeral was delayed 30 minutes while the preacher ran home to change. Needless to say, I was allowed to make the coffee with the expensive water from then on. It's still something we all laugh about to this day, even the preacher. Edit, there seems to be some confusion about the water. Tap water, faucet water, city water, whatever you call it where you live. It's water that's been treated at a water treatment plant, mixed with chlorine and fluoride, and pumped back into your homes so you can make mac and cheese to go with your dino nuggies. It's not gray water. When I said the water was used to flush toilets and wash hands, not for drinking, I meant no one cared about the taste. We weren't a restaurant or residential. We just need to clean stuff and make our poop go down. Maybe the faucet needed to be taken off and soaked in CLR, or maybe the old pipes are getting rusty. Heck, maybe they're lead pipes, I don't know. This was almost 20 years ago. I may stop by, get a sample and have it tested. I live in another town now. My point was, no one is drinking from the break room sink faucet because why would they? We provided the water cooler and a fridge full of bottled water. Hope that cleared up my misunderstandings. I don't know if this makes sense, but just purely based on the vibes of the sentence alone, if someone were to say, at my work, I work at a funeral home by the way, I just intentionally choose not to drink the tap water there. I feel like that's something that you just give a pass to because of the way it sounds. I myself would definitely not challenge that and say something like, no bro, you need to go drink that funeral home faucet water. It's perfectly good funeral home faucet water. Jellyfish Fit 3871 commented, man, my family, small town, uses one funeral home. I'm convinced that it's the choice because the coffee is pretty decent for funeral home coffee, but I'm also convinced that we just hire random preachers because those guys are forever describing my late relatives as really wonderful people, and I know better. It's a strange business model. Our next story is, manager gets himself in trouble. It was during the financial crisis in 2009. I was newly graduated and couldn't find a teaching job anywhere around me. So I got a paraprofessional job, teaching assistant but more working with kids rather than doing mindless tasks. It didn't pay enough, so I became a waitress at a banquet hotel. I found myself working 7 days a week sometimes, for months on end. I told the manager there that there were certain days I wanted off, but he never complied. Multiple times, I told him I needed rest and he didn't listen. No surprise, I developed bronchitis. I told him I had bronchitis and was told I shouldn't be giving people food. I had a doctor's note saying I shouldn't work. He didn't accept it and said I had to go in. So I did. It just so happened the hotel manager and owner did a surprise observation that day. They heard me cough. I told them I had bronchitis. They asked why I was there. I told them the truth and showed them the manager's text saying I still had to come in. The manager and I were pulled into an office. I was sent home and ordered not to come back for 2 weeks. My manager was written up for not following health standards. I quit 2 weeks later. My last day, the manager asked me to come in the next day because they would be swamped. If he had asked a week before, I would have said yes. The last day though? No, I never went back. Am I wrong in saying that OP is doing everybody a disservice if they don't spread the word about the working conditions in that place? I mean, I'd be telling my relatives, my friends and family, don't go to this place because they make their workers work through bronchitis. I mean, with a manager like that, what's one slap on the wrist? They're probably still going to turn around and do it. I mean, look how sleazy they are. They asked OP to come in a day after their last day. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.